All right, fantastic. Um, we are now going to call to order the May 18th, 2022 board meeting and remind everyone to please mute your audio when you're not speaking, as well as state your name prior to making a comment or a motion and a second for an action item. I'm going to begin this evening by calling each commissioner, and I ask that you please respond with a here when I call out your name. Commissioner Bagnell,
I'm here.
Commissioner Doan,
Here.
Commissioner Duggan,
Here.
and Commissioner Sanders. I'm here as well this evening. We'll begin this evening by reports from our Chief Executive Officer and management staff.
Thank you, President Sanders. And just for the record, for those that have joined, I'm Tom Hickman and I am the CEO. All right. Let me get to the right slide here. Portland CRYPTOSPORIDIUM results for the month of April. We reported no CRYPTOSPORIDIUM oocyst detections in the water samples from Bull Run, and a complete result for CRYPTOSPORIDIUM monitoring are posted on the City of Portland's website. Legislative update. I was very pleased. I got a phone call from Congresswoman Bonamici the other day. I think yesterday, can't remember. And the submitted TVWD community project funding request for our Willamette water supply project is moving forward. The request was submitted. We'd asked for, I think, 5, which was on the high side, 5 million. She has moved that forward at 3 million. And she will continue working with the committee and House leadership to advocate for the inclusion of this project in the final bill. So very excited about that opportunity. We also continue to work on the Senate side and the Senate appropriations bill. But they haven't gone through their process yet. So that's forthcoming. Oh, and I should mention, I'm sorry, I'll back up real quick. I got news late this afternoon that we did not get selected for the Bureau of Reclamation grant funding for our AMI work. So we're going to have a debrief with the Bureau of Reclamation for that, and again we'll apply again next year and try to be more competitive in the process for this next year. And the application for that begins now. So we'll be going after that. We earned 3 communications awards recently at the Pacific Northwest AWWA conference. These are merit-based awards, which achieve a standard of excellence in the criteria of message, idea, goal, and alignment with the need to know standard for water industry continuing education units. The entries were judged by a panel of communications and public relations experts within and beyond the water industry. So the awards we won was for a video series, Talking Water with our virtual customers, or through virtually with our customers, our emergency preparedness calendar, and our consumer confidence reports. So very proud of the team and the work there. And I got to say, many people have commented to me about the virtual events that we've been holding, and just they really enjoy those. So it's all good. The most recent, speaking of that, the most recent Talking Water episode featured tips for setting up automatic irrigation systems for spring-summer use. We had about 75 in attendance, and it was all related to using water wisely, making repairs, claiming rebates, and backflow testing requirements. The content was provided by our Steve Carper, water conservation technician, and Khalil Howell, our senior water quality inspector. So if we have any customers that are interested in that, you can follow the link there to learn more about water conservation. With that, unless there's any questions for me, oh, you know what? There is one other thing. I'm sorry. I wanted to give an update. So there is somebody tonight that is on here that I'm very excited to introduce. So we have hired Kylie. She is our new HR director. And she will be starting with us June 27th. And she brings a wealth of experience to us, and including in comp and class studies. She comes from the city of McMinnville. She also has done work with the Tualatin Valley Parks and Rec Districts. Great recommendation. So I don't know, Kylie, if you just want to quickly say hi and give a quick introduction.
Of course. So it's so nice to meet you all. And I am thrilled to join Tualatin Valley Water District. This seems like a fantastic match for me. I did have the tough conversation with my city manager in McMinnville today, so it's officially official. I do want to let you all know I have a 134-day Wordle streak I have never lost. So, and I did get it in 3 today. So judging by the early conversation in the meeting, I think I'll fit in just fine here at TVWD. But I'm real excited to join the team, happy to serve this organization in HR, and I can't wait to get to know everybody better.
So welcome aboard, Kylie, and look forward to you joining our team here quickly. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn this over to Clark Balfour, and Clark, take it away.
Well, thank you. So as I'm giving the department report tonight, so that I also give the safety moment. So the safety moment is on something that's near and dear to my heart. Paul, if you'll advance it. It is I think Paul's my control today. There you go. We're talking about May being National Electric Safety Month, and near and dear to my heart is I stay away from all things electrical. So this one is something that I adhere to carefully. But once again, Safety Awareness Month, how to avoid a few potential electrical hazards, and just a few ideas. Please advance, Paul. So tips. Now, this is nothing new, right? Check electrical cords for fraying or cracking, replace them, and don't overload those electric outlets. And that frayed cord right there is, I hear all stories from my son, who's a firefighter. I hear stories all the time about these types of things sparking. Maybe there's a blanket or something nearby or some paper, and before you know it, you have a problem. The picture below, we've all seen it, and most of us have probably done it, but we're not going to ask anybody to confess overloading power strips or outlets and those sorts of things. But remember, extension cords are intended to be temporary, and don't overload those extension cords and power strips. It just creates all sorts of problems. Although, admittedly, when you're trying to hook up your home office and you've got multiple screens and other devices, before you know it, your power strip can look pretty crowded. So be careful on that. Paul? Now, this is one, once again, back to the fire hazard thing. Not having plugs all the way in, not all the way secured into outlet, maybe having outlet covers not present, not there, can present all sorts of problems, and particularly to children. And then as usual, keep electric appliances and tools away from water. You wouldn't think we really have to talk about that much, but if you go and Google the number of people who have had serious injury and even death from dropping a charging cell phone into a bathtub, it is phenomenal. And so be careful. Don't do it. And just put that phone away for a while. Paul, please advance. And so this is where it comes in. Keep your home system in electrical repair. Contact a qualified person if you're going to be fooling around with things. And if you're gonna do that home maintenance project, like taking down a chandelier and cleaning it and wanting to put it back together, maybe turn that breaker off first before you really start fooling around with it. But with that, those are the safety tips for the month and safety ideas. And I'll move on to my next presentation, which is the legal department report. And there it is. So once again, periodically, we provide an update in very brief form to talk about some of the things that we've been assisting with. One of the ongoing projects that we've had is the CIS acquisition and implementation. And you're going to hear more about that tonight from Andrew Karlstrom. So it's on my list, and it is the fact that I'm on call in case issues come up. The good news is I'm like the Maytag repairman commercials. No one calls me because the project, as you'll hear from Andrew, is going well, and we haven't had legal issues. They're just working appropriately on the substance of implementing this into the system. So while I carry it as an on-call kind of topic, this has been a very smooth project from a legal point of view. We've also been working with the city of Beaverton on various agreements. One is the KEMMER Road intertie, which you'll take action on tonight to provide the interconnection between our system and Beaverton system to provide more resiliency and redundancy in the Cooper Mountain area. And then we will have upcoming at the June meeting an amendment to our Walker Road emergency connection agreement with the city to provide some additional fire flow until they complete some projects. Next slide, please. This is a time of year that this May, June period is a time of the year when a lot of our agreements come up for renewal or perhaps seeking new contracting opportunities, particularly with our supply agreements, our vendor agreements for day-to-day supplies, pipe fittings, those kinds of things. So those come up. We've been working on those lately. We have the audit extension, which comes up periodically at this time of year, and you'll see that on the agenda tonight. We've been working on the RFP and then the contract for the mission, vision, values, and strategic planning effort that is actually, it's kicking off. I think it's kicking off tomorrow morning at the all-employee meeting. And then, of course, and this, Kylie's going to love this because she will be right in the middle of our class compensation study. And so we're going to be getting that going here in the very, very near future to select a consultant and then start to provide that study and that information to you and to the leadership team in order to make any adjustments that we need to make. Next, please. And then we have some other items. So if you recall, a month ago, we came to you and talked about some of the final things easement-wise to be put in final form for the WIF as well as the Willamette Water Supply Program at the property in Wilsonville that you jointly own with the city of Wilsonville. And part of that discussion also was, are there other land adjustments or parcel adjustments that we can make with the city that maybe reflects the changes over the last 20 years since we first bought that property. We've just heard from Wilsonville that they are interested in pursuing that kind of discussion. And so we're going to embark on that over the summer, essentially, because of the Wilsonville schedule, and bring that back to you. The board is going to have to make final decisions on what to do and where and when. So that's something that you're going to see probably in the later part of the summer as we formulate a plan, bring it back to you for, at least consensus approval. Then we have the final deal back for final approval. We do have one pending litigation matter that we anticipate having an executive session with you next month to talk about where we are with that. We also have a new statute that goes into effect on June 3rd that resulted from this short session, which was House Bill 4061. I'm not sure they've actually codified it in the statute yet, so I can't give you an ORS number. But essentially, this attempts to address an issue regarding bulk water purchasers, primarily down in the Southern Oregon area, where folks who didn't have water rights were buying water from municipal providers to then go to use for agricultural purposes in the Rogue River Valley, and primarily for cannabis operations, and most of them illegal. So there was a state statute drawn that if you sell bulk water, you as a water provider need to maintain certain records and to provide those records to law enforcement upon request. So we already do that. I mean, there's nothing in this law that changes anything that we do or that has required us to take on additional functions. This was something we were already doing for contractors that buy water, for other folks that need bulk water from us. So it doesn't really have an impact on us, but I just wanted you to know that there was a recent statutory change that puts an affirmative duty on water providers to track these kinds of transactions. And then finally, I just want to talk briefly about three recent appellate court cases that have the district's not directly involved with, but they do have some impact on us. And I just thought they might be instructive to you in a couple of ways. The first one is Walton versus Nesquin Regional Sanitary Authority. That is a case that is on review to the Oregon Supreme Court right now. Briefs are due tomorrow, as a matter of fact. And so the facts of this are, back in the early 1990s, the Nesquin Regional Sanitary Authority down at the coast wanted to put a sewer line through private property. And they went through the Walton's property, and there was a handshake deal that if that the Waltons could get a free sewer connection for allowing the pipe to go through the property. Pipe went in the ground. Nothing happened until 2014 when the descendants of Mr. Walton came forward and said, "We're ready for our connection." And at that point, the sanitary authority denied it. It said, "We don't have anything in writing. Everybody who was there was dead. We have no record of it. So we don't think that you're entitled to it." That generated a lawsuit. And the Court of Appeal, the trial court, ruled in favor of the sanitary authority, saying, if you have a claim like this, it really sounds in contract. You have 6 years from the date that the pipe went in the ground to bring that claim or to make your demand for connection. You didn't do it. You sat on it for 25 years. There's no recovery here. And so the landowners tried to say, well, that's inverse condemnation. That's when government takes property without paying for it. So you do need to pay us for it. The trial court ruled against them on those points. The Court of Appeals wrote from our perspective, from local government's perspective, wrote a great opinion that said, look, whether it's contract or whether it's inverse condemnation, the clock starts ticking from the time that pipe goes in the ground, from the time that there's a physical occupation of the property by government. And that's an objective date, and that starts the clocks, not something that could happen in the future when you show up 25 years later and say, where's my connection? When there's no writing, when there's nothing else that justifies it. So that case is now on further appeal to the Oregon Supreme Court. We've been working with other lawyers to write an amicus brief to the court. As I said, it's due tomorrow. And that is on behalf of Special District Association League of Oregon Cities and Association of Oregon Counties. So we're hopeful to get a good result that provides a lot of certainty for local government, because otherwise, we all, particularly older entities that may have, pipes in the ground that maybe weren't properly documented years and years and years ago, that would take potential ticking bombs off the table. And I think that would be good for the public. And so in any event, stay tuned on that one. The other two cases are public records cases. And I want to bring them up just to confirm a couple things and actually to talk about I think a new development. So the first one is Bielostowski versus Cummings. That's a case out of West Lynn. And if you recall, there was a lot of controversy in West Lynn over the last few years. And there was a lot of citizen input, a lot of citizen participation, and folks that were somewhat critical of the council and what they were doing. During some of these meetings, the petitioner in this case, Mr. Bielowski, who, by the way, is now on the West Lynn City Council, but at the time he wasn't, noticed that the existing commissioner or counselor, Terry Cummings, was taking notes during all the public meetings. And she would take notes. She took them home. They were her own private notes, but they were taken in the course of the public meeting and helped her remember what was said and those sorts of things. I always thought that those records, even though they weren't in the actual physical control of the district, I always believed that those records would be considered public records if someone made a request for them. Well, the court confirmed that and said it in pretty emphatic terms. So any question that there was about, these are private writings, they're not really public writings, that has now been put to bed. So, I just want to remind you that, if you have notes, if you have other documents that you compile to use in the course of making deliberations toward decisions, and you keep them at home, they still could be subject to a public records request. So just keep that in mind. I don't think it's a surprise decision. I just think that it confirms what a lot of folks suspected over the years. And so, just consider that accordingly in how you maintain those records, and they may need to be available in case there's a request for them. The final case is the City of Portland versus Bartlett. It's a little more nuanced, but it is a little concerning to me. So essentially, the public records law says that these are public records and they may be exempt from disclosure. And the courts have been pretty consistent about, the interpretation of the right to inspect a public record is going to be viewed broadly, and what is a public record. And yet any exemption, any claim that it's not subject to disclosure is going to be pretty narrowly construed. There's a provision in the public records law that says records that are over 25 years old, unless they're a personnel record, records over 25 years old are subject to discovery. That once a record is more than 25 years old, even if it may have been exempt from disclosure, once it hits that 25-year mark, it's open to inspection. The prevailing theory always was that, well, the public records law also talks about not upsetting any other privilege or confidential designation of documents that may appear in other parts of the law. And most lawyers, me included, thought, okay, well, that means if I give you a legal opinion, and that legal opinion could be in an email, it could be in a formal memo, it could be any of that, that those were privileged under another statute, 40.225. And therefore, that 25-year rule did not apply to that. Well, the Supreme Court in this Bartlett case said that's not true. The 25-year rule applies to legal opinions as well. And so, you can't say, well, no, it's privileged under this other statute. The fact is, if it's a public agency, it is subject to disclosure. That could be kind of disturbing in a way, because while most of the time, you know, we may give an opinion that deals with something that is an old transaction, you know, an old real estate transaction from way back in the day, you know, maybe it doesn't matter much anymore at that point. But there could be things like a joint powers agreement, like an agreement we have with other entities for long-term construction, operation, maintenance, and repair of water facilities. And perhaps there's an opinion given that says, you know, we may be on shaky ground on this provision under the agreement. Well, that agreement may be going for 50 years. And somebody might be able to get a hold of an opinion that was given 26 years ago and say, aha, you know, you recognized that maybe this was a legal risk point that you were vulnerable under on this agreement. And so we're going to use that against you now because this agreement is ongoing. So it's that kind of example that perhaps makes things a little tenuous here. I will say this, there's an incredibly long footnote where the Supreme Court said, we don't like this any better than you do. We don't think that this is the correct result, but as the way the legislature has written this statute, this is what we think the plain meaning of it is. And essentially invited the legislature to change and actually exempt these kinds of opinions and put public agencies on the same equal footing that private parties are. And I think there's probably a pretty good chance that we'll see that in the legislative session this year. But in any event, where it is now, you know, once things hit 25 years, we have to assume that they are going to be discoverable, whether there's an exemption for them or not. So curious decisions, probably a little ethereal, but in any event, you know, there is I think it's a confirmation of the court that they're going to uphold disclosure of records unless there's a clear exemption, and that exemption is going to be narrowly seen. And in the absence of some clear direction from the legislature, records are going to be available for disclosure. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Clark, this is Todd Sanders. I only have one quick question, which has to do with the first of the three legal discussions you had, and that was 6 years.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Why 6?
Okay, you know, thank you for that, because I just got into shorthand assumptions that everybody knows these things. Statutes of limitation. I should have led with that. There are, for various kinds of actions, there are statutes of limitations. So if you have a negligence action, you know, your typical car accident in the street, you have to bring your claim within 2 years of the date of the event. If it's a contract action, or now an inverse condemnation action, it's 6 years from the date of the event. If it's a warranty claim, it's 4 years from the date the warranty is breached. And if it's a construction-related claim, they will say, well, if it's negligence in construction or design, it's 2 years. If it's a breach of contract in construction or design, it's 6 years. But there are dates of discovery built into that maybe extend when that 2 year or 6 year period begins. And so there's a third statute, which they call ultimate repose, that says, but in all events, if it's 10 years beyond the date of the event, you know, there's just no claim. So you have these funny little threads of time, but typically it's 2 years or 6 years. And in construction cases, you might be able to get to 10 years. And so that was really the issue. You know, was this a broken contract, then there was 6 years on that. And the court also said, but even if it is an inverse condemnation claim, that still is a 6-year statute of limitations. And they relied on a case from Ashland years ago. So I'm sorry, that was where the 6 years comes from. And it's in our interest to hold these kinds of claims to a 6-year statute of limitations from the date of the physical occupation.
Thank you. I think Commissioner Duggan also has a question for you.
Yeah, I have a question on that same case. Did the sanitary authority get an easement at the time that the handshake agreement of the connection was given, or was there's still a line on private property without a formal easement? Because you think
There's
that was
still a line on private property without a formal easement. They did not get a doc. I mean, in terms of what are best business practices, that definitely was not followed here. You know, there was not an easement, and also there was not a written contract saying, you know, if you give us this, you'll get that. And then, you know, this time has gone by. So, you know, you have to look at it almost in an adverse possession context. And you now have a line on private property believe me, so it may solve the issue that there's, you know, there's a sewer line on private property, but there still are issues about, well, how wide is that easement? And all those other things that you try to take care of when you negotiate one. So for example, the court's going to say, okay, well, you've got an easement and you've got a reasonable right of use of that easement and a reasonable area. Well, what's a reasonable area? Is it 10 feet? Well, you can't, it's hard to get a backhoe in something and work in a 10-foot area, right? And if you have to get down and repair that line and you're trying to excavate it, you know, do you have enough room? If it's a 10-foot wide thing, do you have enough room to sidecast and do your work, or can you get a truck in there and all those kinds of things? So, you know, the problem is solved in these cases for the day, but at some point there's going to be another rub on that property when somebody has to go in and fix that line. Now, you know, maybe you can resolve all that if it's a sewer line and you can do pipe bursting techniques and those sorts of things, so you never have to enter the property, but who knows? So, you know, it answers the question today. It leaves open a bunch of potential conflicts for tomorrow.
That's sad, because I think there was a compromise there that could have kept it out of court. Seems like the only winners on this one is the people of your profession. Sorry.
That is true, and it's a point well taken.
All right. Well, thank you, Clark, and please pass on our appreciation to your entire staff for the work that they do.
Thank you. I will.
You're welcome. All right. Our next item is going to be reports of meetings attended by the commissioners. And first up will be Commissioner Bagnell.
It's that whole front of the alphabet thing. Okay, my first report of meetings attended is on the 26th of April. I met with Commissioner Duggan and the CFO and CEO and Andrea and Andrew, I do believe, also in our role as finance committee members. And we got updates on the CIS project, the COLA policy, and issues regarding potential rate increases. Then on the 3rd, there was the board work session, the regular board work session, where we talked about the Willamette Water Supply Project, the customer information system update, and an update on the RAC, the Rate Advisory Committee. And then, of course, there's tonight's meeting on regular district business.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Bagnell. Commissioner Doan.
Yes, I attended the WIF meeting, the Willamette Intake Facilities, and that's the last Monday of the month. And it was remarkable by the fact that there was nothing controversial about the whole meeting. Then the board work session on the first Tuesday, and then tonight's meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Doan. Commissioner Duggan?
Yes. I attended the Finance Committee meeting that Commissioner Bagnell detailed on the CIS, COLA, and audit updates. On the 3rd of May, I attended the board work session where we got updates on the WWSS, the CIS, and the RAC. On the 5th, I attended the regular Willamette Water Supply System board meeting. On the 9th, I attended the Talking Water session, the video, webinar about irrigation and the spring tune-up. On the 10th, I attended our board agenda planning meeting between President Saunders and myself. That same day, I attended the CPO #1 meeting in the evening, where we got updates for the Washington County election coming up, and then also for development that is taking place very near my home, but it's the redevelopment of the Cedar Hill Shopping Center, which currently is served by our water district with water, but it's now inside the city limits of Beaverton. And then tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Duggan. Lastly, for myself, I met on 4/25 with Tom to discuss some of the state legislative planning for lobbying efforts and a hiring update. On the 2nd, along with our Chief Executive Officer and our lobbying members, we met with the Chief of Staff of Senator Wyden to share information about TVWD and the funding request that we are seeking. And then on the 3rd, we met similarly, did a Zoom meeting with Senator Merkley's Chief of Staff to do the same thing, to give information and to verbalize the request for some support during this increase in costs that we're experiencing. The 5th was our board work session. The 9th, Tom and I met with 2 members of CFM to discuss again some of the lobbying plans and the lobbying schedule that will be coming up here as we attempt to increase our presence both locally but statewide, and then also with our federal agencies. And then as Commissioner Duggan mentioned, we met on the 10th for agenda setting. And then I met, today is Wednesday, so I met on Monday with Tom to get an update on hiring. I just learned of our new hire then, which he was very excited to share and smiled. Deep and happy smile for Tom. And then this evening's meeting for myself. So that will wrap up my meetings for the month. And that will now move us on to topics to be raised by the commissioners. And I will ask fellow board members, do we have any topics to be raised by commissioners this month? Not hearing anything then. We will move on to our next agenda item, which is the public comment section. Public comment time is set aside for persons wishing to address the board on items on the consent agenda and matters not on the agenda. Additional public comment will be invited on agenda items as they are presented. And I'd ask, do we have any persons this evening who would like to comment? I understood originally that we had at least one community member who would like to speak this evening. Are they still here?
They dropped off.
They did drop off. Okay, I'm sorry to hear that. Well, I would certainly like them to know that they are welcome to come back anytime and speak. I got a comment here. No.
Looks like, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So
He rejoined the meeting. Could you read through the standard language again really quick, Commissioner Sanders?
great. Thank you, Debbie. So we have now reached the public comment section of our meeting, and public comment time is set aside for persons wishing to address the board on items on the consent agenda and matters not on the agenda. Additional public comment will be invited on agenda items as they are presented. And I believe we do have a person this evening who would like to comment. I would, before we let you speak, remind you that each person is limited to 5 minutes, and unless an extension is granted. Should 3 or more persons testify on the same topic, each person would be limited to 3 minutes. So at this time, I would welcome our guests to introduce themselves. Please give your name and where you are located within the district, and feel free to speak.
So Morris, you'll have to unmute yourself. There's a icon towards the top of the screen that has the mic and it has a slash through it. Just click on that.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Morris Yasolia, and I've been customer of Tualatin Valley Water District for 45 years. I lived all the way from down in Beaverton in Mockingbird Court, that's on the bottom of the Weir Road, and I came to Caselta Court, that's KEMMER View, and now I'm in Jensen, across from the mining area that called Baker Rock Resources, and my house is across the street from it. And I've been resident here for 22 years, and my house is 22 years old. So it's fairly new, very nice built house. It's all brick and concrete and blocks. So I went for a work-related. I just retired this year, and I'm just traveling a lot for running my business outside Oregon. And I came back, and my water bill was about $17,946. To my surprise, for 5 days of trip that was a lots of water gone through my meter. And I found out, I called immediately when I saw there is no pressure on line. I immediately called your emergency line, and very nice guy came and shut the water off. As soon as he left, I started digging the area. We found out that there was a leak. And as I was going down, I had to go like about 7 feet down before I could get to the place that was broken. It was like a 90-degree joint, elbow that was broken. And it took my plumber 2 days to fix it because of the pressure that was online. And he used to use shark bites and every other tools to get that pressure and not breaking the line, and keeps breaking it. Finally, he got it done. And we put gravel, and we made it really secure. Anyway, I have got $11,557 credit adjustment thanks to a couple of your persons over there, especially the lady that Miss Watson. They gave me that credit. but my balance is $6,320.30. And I don't know if you've been in this area or not. I live off of Grabhorn in Aloha, and every Wednesday they have explosion and explosives going out, and my house starts shaking so bad. My animals are almost having heart attack. And anyway, I was wondering if there is any insurance that you guys have in place for people that are traveling and going out of town, and they come back and their bill is about $18,000 like mine. Or I don't understand it, how we could be secure ourselves when this accident like this is happening. I've been in contact with my insurance. They don't cover this kind of thing because it's outside the house. And my bill is only $60 a month and not $6,000. So that's why I called and I said I should come to the board and ask you guys if you don't have any plans or policy to cover somebody like me. Maybe it's good way to discuss this and see if there's anything for us as a homeowner to be protected, because when we are out of the house, we don't know what's going to happen to our house. So that's why I thought I'd come to the board meeting, take your time and see if there's anything else you can do for me. I have already talked to Baker Rock Resource, and they have basically no plans to help me with this bill. And that's what my concern is. So I thought I should bring it up to you guys and see if there's anything else you can do for me.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your presentation, sir. I'm getting some feedback. I'm getting some feedback as I talk.
Morris, I just muted you. If you did need to speak again to reply to Commissioner Sanders, please unmute yourself.
Thank you for your presentation. It sounds like you're in communication with the right people within the district and receiving the help that we can provide for you. I think you're trying to talk, but you might have to, again, unmute.
I said I appreciate it. I think I'm in communication with Ms. Watson. Hopefully we could come up to some kind of disclosure to this, but anyway, it's a problem that probably I'm not the only one facing. There are other people that face, especially when we do leave the city or the country for a few days. We need to be protected somehow.
Okay. Well, thank you again for your presentation and your recommendation. The board does appreciate your time. Thank you.
I want to also say thank you. Thank you for taking time.
Yes, thank you as well.
I appreciate
All right. We will now move on to our next item for the evening, which will be our consent agenda. And the consent agenda items are considered to be routine and may be enacted with one motion without separate discussion. Any board members may request that an item be removed by motion for discussion and separate action. Any items requested to be removed from the consent agenda for separate discussion will be considered immediately after the board has approved those items which do not require discussion. My apologies for the interruption there. This evening, we're going to approve or recommend for approval the April 20th of 2022 regular meeting minutes, the May 3rd, 2022 work session minutes, and to adopt Resolution 05-22, a resolution authorizing the Chief Executive Officer to extend the audit services agreement with Moss Adams LLP for 2 additional years. Do I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented?
This is Jim Doan, and I so move.
Thank you.
And this is Commissioner Bagnall. I second.
Thank you. And now I'd like to ask our district recorder to please provide the roll call vote.
Commissioner Bagnall,
Yes.
Commissioner Doan,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan,
Yes.
Commissioner Sanders.
Yes. Fantastic. The motion passes. Thank you. And next will be item number 2, the business agenda, where this evening we will consider adopting Resolution 06-22, a resolution approving the intergovernmental agreement between the Tualatin Valley Water District and the City of Beaverton for system interconnection at the Southwest KEMMER Road to allow for providing reliable water service to present and future customers in the event of an emergency or planned maintenance of pumping facilities. And we will begin with a staff report from Nick Augustus and Clark Balfour. Nick?
Good evening, President Sanders, members of the board. It's my pleasure to present on this IGA between TVWD and the City of Beaverton. And if we'll advance the next slide. So this IGA is set up between the two entities as a mutually beneficial IGA. The Cooper Mountain area is high in elevation, and both City of Beaverton and TVWD receive our water sources at the valley floor, and we both have to pump to push water up to these tanks. And you can see in the picture on the right, the near tanks on the lower end of the picture. Those are Tualatin Valley Water District's Cooper Mountain reservoirs, and on the far side, the top of the screen, that is City of Beaverton. As I mentioned, this is mutually beneficial, as both the city and TVWD only have a single way to pump water to the top of the mountain. And by establishing an interconnection between the two, we're able to both save costs and reduce impact to the general public. This will connect the reservoirs that are up there, and in an emergency event or planned outage, either entity will be able to provide the other with water. There's isolation valves that keep them separate until they're needed, and we do have SCADA controls, which allows us to monitor remotely if water flows through there. Next slide, please. As far as the infrastructure included in this agreement, on the right side of the screen, on the city property, there's a water line that runs the length of the frontage of the city property. That's termed in the IGA the city water line. The little box on the west side of that property is the valve vault. and that will be jointly owned by TVWD and the city, and the city will maintain that. And then from that vault to the TVWD property, that line will be designed and constructed by TVWD and owned after that. So as far as payment for the three items, the city will cover the cost of the city water line and 50% of the valve vault, and TVWD will cover the cost of the 24-inch water line to TVWD's property and 50% of the valve vault as well. And with that, are there any questions? Hearing none, we would like to present to the board, consider adopting a resolution approving the intergovernmental agreement between Tualatin Valley Water District and the city of Beaverton for system interconnection at Southwest KEMMER Road.
Thank you, Nick. Do I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution 0622, which, as Nick properly stated, is a resolution approving the IGA, the intergovernmental agreement between TVWD and the city of Beaverton for the system interconnection at Southwest KEMMER Road?
This is Jim Doan, so moved.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Bagnall, I will second.
Great, thank you. I'd like to ask our district recorder to please provide a roll call vote.
Commissioner Bagnall,
Yes.
Commissioner Doan,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan,
I abstain because I am currently employed by the city of Beaverton, but that fact will change by the end of next month. I'm in support of this IGA, but I would like the record to state for the last time that I abstain because my employer is the city of Beaverton currently.
thank you, that will be noted. And Commissioner Sanders.
Yes. All right, fantastic. Thank you. The motion passes. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Clark. And now we move on to item B this evening, which is to consider adopting the Rate Advisory Committee's charter, and we'll receive a report this evening from Andrea Watson and Paul Matthews. Andrea, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Good evening, Chair Sanders and commissioners. We're here tonight to talk with you about the Rate Advisory Committee. We've been talking with you over the last several months, and the draft of the charter that we're asking you to approve was part of your board packet. So tonight I was just going to go over kind of some of the high-level materials here. One is we have a proposed schedule in the charter that involves appointing members next month and starting the meetings in August, which we characterize here as fall and winter. And we have a proposed schedule with 4 meetings and a 5th meeting option should the committee need more time to complete their recommendations. And then we would have the Board of Commissioners receive those recommendations from their committee in the winter. December, January is what we're thinking, but again, we want to be flexible to let the group form and do their work. It is a lot of material to present to them, and we want to make sure that we don't hem them in so far that it's not an enjoyable experience. We want them to be able to process the information and give you some good recommendations. And then we would take it from that point on, and we would report to the community the accomplishments of the Rate Advisory Committee. And then we would keep doing those reports periodically as we implement the recommendations that they've made, should we choose to do any, so that the community knows that we have taken their input to implementation. The scope of the work for the RAC members is to meet, to study customer affordability issues and make recommendations. So we've, worked with you through the last several months to get the scope of this, defined. We also are proposing 3 policy questions in 2 areas, all of them again around affordability. So the first one is, should the district address affordability within its rate structure? And if they do recommend we do that, what are the options? So we would like them to give some specific recommendations. And then also to identify what other policy considerations would go along with the recommendations that they would choose. And then the second question on affordability programming. So we have a customer emergency assistance program. And we want to know if the committee thinks that we should offer additional programs. And if so, what options do they recommend? And what are the policy considerations for their recommendations? And then the last question, as we've framed it up in the charter, is about rate design. And this would be the question of, should the district adjust the allocation of the revenue received between the fixed and volume charges? And so this really starts involving the peaking question. And if you guys have a lot of questions about this, I'm going to refer you to Paul. In completing the work of the charter for your consideration to adopt, we also did update this outreach timeline. So when we first proposed this, we thought about starting our meeting in July. And, you know, we just know it's going to take a little bit of time to get these committee members recruited and on board. So we thought building in a little bit more time for us to get the data together, the reports that the committee would need to receive, that we would start meeting in August. So we did make that change, and we will continue to bring this timeline back to you and give you updates on the progress that we're making on the outreach related to the RAC. And so with that, if you have any questions for me or Paul, we'd be happy to take those. Otherwise, we're asking you to consider adopting the Rate Advisory Committee charter.
Sounds like everybody's on board, Andrea and Paul. So I'm going to move forward and ask if I can receive a motion and a second to adopt the Rate Advisory Committee charter.
This is Commissioner Duggan. So moved.
And Commissioner Bagnall, I second.
Great, thank you.
I'm big on seconding tonight.
You're doing a wonderful job. I'd like to ask our district recorder to please provide the roll call vote.
Commissioner Bagnall,
Yes.
Commissioner Doan,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan,
Yes.
Commissioner Sanders.
Yes. Thank you. The motion passes. And next, item number C this evening is to consider adopting Resolution 07-22, which is a resolution approving the district's 2022-2023 financial plan. And this will be presented by our Chief Financial Officer, Paul Matthews. Paul?
Good evening, President Sanders, Commissioners. So tonight is the culmination of quite a few meetings that we've had with you, with Finance Committee and others. We've got a lot of information here. None of it is very original at all. You've seen it before, but to get it in the public record, I wanted to present it here tonight. So I'll go through this pretty quickly. If you have questions, please slow me down and we can talk about that. But as I said, this information's all information that you've seen before. So tonight, I do want to briefly talk about our financial management process. I'll be very brief about that. I'll talk about the financial plan and who the intended audience is for our financial plan and why do we create such a plan. I'll give you a quick overview of the 2022-23 financial plan and talk a little bit about the key assumptions, results, and then what our next steps will be. So the district has a very structured financial management process. And we are actually in the financial planning stage of that. That's where we work with the rest of the district, gather capital improvements plan, work with the Willamette Supply Program. That also then would feed our budget process. We're in the middle of a biennium this time, so we're not actually going to be changing the budget process, but in fact what we're doing is adjusting our financial plan in midstream consistent with our budget. It'll also then generate rate increases, and then of course we'll be delivering the 8 billion gallons of water and so forth that we do for our customers. So here it is in general, each of the steps that we go through. The key thing about our process is that there's oversight throughout the entire process. Through the financial planning process, we publish this document, we put it on our website, we make it available to our customers. Our budget process, we have a budget committee, it's a public process, we put it on our website. Rates will go through a very rigorous rate process. In fact, you just heard Andrew talk about our rate advisory committee process. We'll go through that as well. And then on the delivery side, once we're done delivering these things, in addition to every other part of the district that has oversight from the financial perspective, we'll also have our independent audit, which you extended the contract for the auditors just earlier tonight. So throughout our entire process, it's focused on being transparent, being technically accurate, and making sure that we have adequate oversight of what we do. The audience for the intended audience for the financial plan, really it varies. The purpose is to ensure that we have a strategic focus. Financial planning allows us to incorporate the other planning the district does, whether it's the stuff that our program director does over the water supply program, Dave Krasko, or what we do in our engineering group, focuses us strategically. It provides accountability over time. Most organizations don't this, but we publish our financial plan, we keep it available, and that's part of our accountability. Provides necessary information to our stakeholders. People know what our plans are and why we're doing it and the motivations for the actions that we take. And it demonstrates the most important thing from my perspective as your CFO is that it demonstrates the board's commitment to a strong financial management. The fact that you take time to go through the process to give us guidance in developing our financial strategies and then improving a financial plan, it really does prove that in a very tangible way. The audiences that we have are internal stakeholders. We use this internally to calibrate our actions. The finance community, those are our partners, but also bankers and others out there that want to understand better what the district's financial plans are. Rating agencies, we turn this over right now. In fact, we're having our routine, what they call a surveillance call, but each year we have a call with one of the rating agencies and we walk through our financial plan. We give them this document, we pull information out of it and answer all those questions. Very important. And then we provide it to the WIFIA program team. Normally, our financial management policies have us doing the financial plan at least once in a biennium. We tee that up with the budget. Because of the cost increases at the Willamette Water Supply Program, we're doing kind of a mid-biennium update to the financial plan. We're bringing it to you tonight. All right, so our financial management policies do require a biennial adoption. As I said, this is a mid-year adjustment. We're asking for the formal approval by the board. That is within the financial management, the policies that the board adopted back in 2019. You adopted a set of financial policies which require that we do this at least on a biennial basis. And again, the important thing is your approval demonstrates your strong financial oversight of the district's financial matters. We have an approval rather than adoption. Since the financial plan itself, it provides guidance to management. It doesn't actually set firm policies. And in fact, the rate process that we'll undertake will be a separate board-directed process. So this doesn't do any more than provide an outline and a plan of action, the finances, and the board will be taking additional actions as relates to rates and other matters. So we ask for your approval rather than adoption. You've seen this before, and so I'm not going to go through it in a whole lot of detail, but these are the components of the financial plan, the main elements of it. And I think that, in fact, you've seen this. We provided the financial plan with the board packet, so you saw that earlier this week when we provided it. We did make one change from before. We did not include the CIP section, which had all the projects list and the project descriptions. Those are included in our budget document, and that's available on our website. We thought it was somewhat redundant to include it here and wasn't necessary, so we took that out. In fact, it adds a lot of size and weight to the plan without adding a lot of clarity. So that is one difference in the plan document that we provided to you and what we've had in prior years. What you see here is our operating capital expenditure plan. This shows how We are going to be spending money during the planning year. We look at a 30-year period. The financial forecast actually goes out for 30 years. We focus on the first 10 years. And in fact, because of the Willamette Water Supply Program, our primary focus is getting to July 1 of 2026. That's the critical thing for us to get to fiscal year 27, essentially. But you can see that a large amount of our spending, if you look at the operating capital expenditure, is in that line on capital outlays. As we make this once in a generation investment in the Willamette Water Supply Program, our capital expenditures are at all-time high as we do invest in that water system. And we anticipate that that will then, of course, taper off after the program is complete and free up cash flow for other district capital improvements and to, frankly, pay off the debt on the debt that we're incurring to build out the program. Here's a graphical representation of our expenditure plan to give you a sense of the magnitude. The teal, the light blue color, I'm not good with my colors, but the light blue color that you see there, the big spend, that is for the capital outlay in 23, 24, and 25, quite a bit higher than what we'll anticipate after the program is complete. Our capital expenditure funding plan is presented here. We're going to rely quite a bit on our WIFIA loan proceeds, and then we will be securing additional financing for using traditional revenue bonds. And in fact, I do want to point out that you might recall in prior presentations, I've talked about our current debt capacity being set by the bond ordinance adopted in 2019 at $600 million. So I'd like to meet with the Finance Committee and talk about the timing of increasing that amount. So Commissioners Bagnall and Duggan, you'll be receiving information, meeting request from us to talk about just that. Could be a very short meeting, talk about the timing and the size, with a hope to come back to the board at the June work session with more information for the entire board's consideration with possible action in June and July. One other thing I want to point out is we have about $100 million, $103 million of capacity, draw capacity on our WIFI loan at the EPA, meaning we've submitted eligible project costs for $103 million, but we haven't drawn the money yet. The reason we hadn't drawn the money is that the interest rates on what we earned was less than the interest rates on what we would be paying to the EPA. That has turned around. In fact, we will be making a substantial draw on that money to reimburse our cash balances that we had before, and then we'll be investing that cash balance to earn a higher return for our customers. I'm not going to hit on all these key assumptions. These are the same assumptions that we presented to you in the financial strategies in the past. But essentially, the key things, I guess, the highlights are that we will be spending $660 million for capital expenditures through 2026. That is that generational investment that we're making in the water supply program. We have assumptions on interest rates. These are presented in the financial plan. As you can see, we're planning on interest rates increasing. When you look at the revenue bonds, those are market-based interest rates. With inflation over 8%, we're assuming that interest rates will creep up even if inflation does creep down, so we can end up in an interest rate environment. Is it going to be 4%, 5%, 6%? Only those with very accurate crystal balls know for sure. But we're planning for 5% in 23, 5.5% in 24, and 25. And then, frankly, the district's borrowing needs will be diminished at that point. One of the other things we do in our financial plan is we forecast how much money we're going to spend on purchased water, and we'll be transitioning from buying water from the city of Portland to getting it primarily from our JWC and the Willamette Water Supply system. And we'll be using the cheapest water first to avoid the cost of pumping power or so forth. And so you'll see we'll transition away from Portland. We'll increase our draw on the JWC, and we'll be bringing in the remainder from the Willamette Water Supply system. That's the current plan that we have from an operational perspective. When you provided us direction, you adopt, I don't know if you remember the exact number, but it was strategy 2B. Back on April 20th as our financial strategy, and that anticipated having rate increases every 6 months. So what you see presented here is a typical bill would be the blue bars. Those typical bills are based on the left-hand axis. The left-hand axis is shows what those typical bills will be over time. The line chart, the line that you see here presents the rate increases presented on the right-hand scale. So we're looking at rate increases that are about 5.75% ish, between 5 and 6%. And I can't emphasize enough that there's a lot of assumptions, and these actual numbers will change as we move through time. But this is the best estimate that we have right now. The financial strategy also anticipates having adjusting the rate increase for November of this year. Currently, the change that the board adopted was 9.5%. And we will be going through a rate process to change that from 9.5% to 14.25%, consistent with the financial strategy. And here's that same information that was presented graphically in a tabular form for those who, like me, would rather see numbers in a table than in a graph where I have to kind of line things up. Our reserve balances will increase as we move past 2026-27, as we set the rates to recover our cost to fund the program and to pay debt service. There will be cash that will need to come in to meet our coverage requirements and our net leverage requirements and so forth. We've talked about that in the past. Essentially, what the point I want you to see from here is that once we hit the 26-27 period, moving out into the future, we will have financial capacity to continue our capital program, especially on those in-district programs. So our next step is, if you do in fact approve this financial plan, consistent with our financial management policies, we will update Appendix A to the district's financial management policies. We will conduct a rate process consistent with the direction of that scenario 2B, which means we will be doing a rate adjustment this summer for an effective date of November of 2022. We have on our list of things to do with you is to have some training on financial disclosure issues. Right now, it's not a burning issue because we don't have any publicly traded debt. But we are going to be turning that around at some point. So we do want to get that on your calendar, and we will be issuing future revenue bonds. So that'll answer any questions that you might have, if there are any.
Okay.
If there are no questions, yes, I'm sorry, President Sanders.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, Paul. Please go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to merely say, here's the staff recommendation, is to adopt the resolution approving the district's financial plan.
Marvelous. Thank you, Paul. So with that, then, do I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 08-22, which is approving the district's 2022-23 financial plan?
This is Commissioner Bagnall, and I would like to so move and also say, really good job, Paul, getting through a lot of complicated stuff quickly and efficiently.
This is Jim Dodd, and I'll second.
Great. Thank you. Can I have our district recorder to please provide a roll call?
Commissioner Bagnall?
Yes.
Commissioner Doan?
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan?
Yes.
Commissioner Sanders?
Yes. Fantastic. The motion passes, and we'll keep on going to item D this evening, which will be to consider adopting Resolution 08-22, which is a resolution establishing the cost of living adjustment, the COLA adjustment, for employee compensation. And again, we're going to hear from our Chief Financial Officer, Paul Matthews.
Thank you, President Sanders, Commissioners. Just real quick, I do want to emphasize, I'm not going to go through all the details, but included in the presentation and in your packet is the information that we have on the district's financial performance. So if you had any questions about that, we can circle back and answer those. Otherwise, I'll move right into right into our presentation tonight. Okay, discussing the cost of living adjustment. So, and again, apologize, the information I'm presenting to you here tonight is information that we've also talked about before. So I will go through this quickly and recognition of the time that you've already spent on it. But I do want to hit the highlights here. So first of all, we're talking about our personal service cost. Given the recent inflationary impacts that we've seen, inflationary effects from the economy, we have an immediate concern on our personal services. The district's pay adjustment formula that we use on July 1st to adjust employees' pay includes CPI as a factor in the formula. So it gets multiplied by the other factors to determine what employees' pay is. And I've walked you through the formula before to show you how that works. But needless to say, by being a multiplier, that can have a profound effect on the pay adjustments during periods of either low inflation or high inflation. When it's in the sweet spot, it works pretty much consistent with what you would see outside in the rest of the market. The district implemented a 2% floor to protect employees during periods of low inflation. That was a necessity, or we would have had attrition. And so we made that adjustment. Now we're in unfamiliar territory with rather high rates of inflation. This is the formula that we've talked about. I'm not going to go through each one of the key elements. We've done this before. We take the score, divide it, multiply it out. But the bottom line is the CPI that you see at the very far right. That is the COLA adjustment. And we use for the COLA either the CPIU all items West size class A. It's a very specific index published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. We look at the number, the year-over-year number published in May. We get it in June, but published for May by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. We either use that number or 2% in the event that that number is below 2%. That's our current practice. But here's the CPI. I plotted it over time. That same index that we use for the pay adjustment formula. The red line that you see here is that 2% floor that we talked about, and the black line is the actual CPI number. You can see that in a few years we were below the floor, and the floor was actually the binding constraint. But you can also see now we're seeing the CPI that is quite a bit higher. In fact, for the month of April, the CPI was at 8.1%. For the month of March, it was reported as 8.4%. So we're up there in quite a high number that we haven't seen, frankly, since the district adopted this pay adjustment formula and has been using it. So we're in uncharted territory. Ran an analysis of different estimated average pay increases that we would experience in the district at different levels of CPI. So essentially, I looked at our scores that we've had traditionally. I looked at the compa ratios that our employees have, and I did a little bit of calculation for 130 some odd employees, and we came up with these estimates. So as an example, if the CPI were reported at 5%, our employees would on average receive a 7.9% increase. And one might look at that and say that seems kind of out of touch. Well, what this is, think of it as a COLA plus a step increase, which is pretty common amongst other agencies that we compete with for employees. One of the other questions that we were asked is, how would the floor affect pay adjustments? And so we were asked that question. We met with the Finance Committee and talked through that. And this shows kind of the difference in what the average score would be. You can see during periods of low inflation, if we just applied the CPI back in 2009 because there was a deflationary impact, actually the higher your performance, the bigger the pay cut you would have had. Well, that isn't tenable, and that's why the floor has been very helpful in making sure that employees were treated fairly. So we did that analysis, and here's the effect overall on a typical or a hypothetical employee. If someone were paid back in 2006 at $10 per hour, and we applied just the CPI and the CPI alone, we compared that to CPI with the floor. There's actually isn't a large difference in what their pay was, but it does get us through those periods with low inflation. That was one of the questions that you all had asked. So with that, we met with the Finance Committee. and the Finance Committee recommended a COLA adjustment of 5% be used in the event that the CPI exceeded the 5%. And the resolution that we have for you tonight essentially incorporates that, as well as other recommendations that the Finance Committee had. So with that, I'll answer any questions that you might have about the COLA adjustment.
I don't think I hear any, Paul. So would you like to recommend? Is there a next page?
I'm sorry, President Sanders. No, this one we're just suggesting the recommending the adoption of the resolution.
All righty. So thank you, Paul. Do I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution 08-22, a resolution establishing the cost of living adjustment, the COLA adjustment for employee compensation?
This is Commissioner Duggan, so moved.
This is Commissioner Doan, second.
Thank you. Can I ask our district recorder to please provide a roll call vote?
Commissioner Bagnall,
Yes.
Commissioner Doan,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan,
Yes.
Commissioner Sanders.
Yes. All right. Sounds like the motion then passes. Thank you, everybody. And we will now move into the final item for the evening, which will be our informational presentation. And we will continue on our once every 2 or 3 weeks presentations on our customer information system implementation update. And for that, we look to Andrew Carlstrom. Andrew?
Thank you, President Sanders. Good evening, President Sanders and Board of Commissioners. So tonight's
Andrew,
update,
are you stealing pictures from Kraska? Because that didn't look like a CIS picture.
that was not a CIS picture, Commissioner Bagnall. Very true. All right, well, I don't have very many pictures to show you tonight, but this is your update on the CIS project. Just a reminder for anyone who hasn't heard this before, what we're doing in this project is we're replacing the legacy utility billing system with a commercial off-the-shelf CIS. This is a partnership with Clean Water Services, and in which we're sharing cost decision-making and ownership of the CIS. TVWD is the managing agency for not just the project, but also ongoing operations. And CIS is a foundational modernization effort for TVWD, as well as Clean Water Services. Let's get to the schedule. So at this point, we are 48 days to go live. And if you look at the green vertical line, that'll show you where we are right now. We're right in the middle of go live, and after that we've got our mock go live 2, go live, and then we have 4 months of stabilization followed by the final acceptance of the product. All right, so we are on track for our July 5th CIS go live. Mock go live number 1 started on May 12th. That'll run through May. This is one of 2 dress rehearsals prior to our cutover activities on 4th of July weekend. We have multiple go, no-go decision points for each mock go live. Good news, data conversion continues really positive results. We're really pleased about the accuracy of our data conversion. And our first decision points for mock go live 1 easily passed. We do have in June 2 major activities, CIS training, as well as the second mock go live. CIS training will be in the boardroom for our staff. That'll run the entire month of June. And then our mock go live runs the first half of June concurrently with training. And that's a much more compressed activity, closer to a real simulation of the cutover and go live activities. So the actual go live, again, this will occur the 4th of July weekend. We shut down the legacy billing system the last day of June. We have the cutover activities over the weekend. And then finally, Tuesday, July 5th, we'll turn on the CIS for our staff, as well as the portal for customers. And that'll be our go live date. So, but the main message tonight is we are on track for that schedule. I wanted to remind everybody about our customer self-service portal, and we'll have more information on this prior to go live for customers. We did get a customer inquiry this week about reading about the new portal and wondering if they'd have to re-register with the new portal, and asking also whether their auto pay would still work. And the good news is on the auto pays, they will transfer in the cutover. In terms of accessing new portal services, you will have to re-register, and as well as if you want to make changes to your Paymentus auto pays. But the good news is it's a very simple registration process, and as we've highlighted before, it's registering, verifying with the verification code, and then connecting with your account number. And if you don't know your account number, there will be a lookup tool. And then finally, we do have a number of communications activities over the next several months. May, we've got our website update. We're notifying our pay plan customers. We've got newsletter articles. And then next month, we've got our coming soon email, and then also more reminders to monthly pay plan customers. And then we'll have our go live, and then more activities for the following several months. We are going to rely on social media for more messaging through spring and summer. And then finally, we will have a Talking Water Live portal demonstration as we continue to promote the portal post go live. So that's the update for tonight. But again, we are on track for our go live schedule. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to entertain them.
Well, I'm sorry, Andrew, this is Todd Sanders. It's really exciting. That Gantt chart really lays it out. We're getting close to the end. You're getting close to the end. Congratulations to your entire team for not going absolutely insane during this entire process, because you pulled it off during COVID. And that should not be forgotten.
Yeah, well, credit goes to the team, and you've got a lot of hardworking people at TVWD and Clean Water Services, as well as our consultant and vendor working to make this happen.
Yeah. Well, thank you to everyone that was involved, because that could not have been easy many times. And it's really exciting to see that after the go live date is just the stabilizations to final acceptance. So that's awesome. Congratulations again. And I think you have the word of the day, paymentus. That's a cool word. Reminds me of yeah, it's a great word, paymentus. All right. Well, thank you, Andrew. Commissioner Bagnell also says thank you. If there are no other questions for Andrew, and I don't hear any, then we will have wrapped up our evening. And with that, I'm going to say, with no further business before the Board of Commissioner, this meeting is adjourned. And